In this case of State versus Phillips, we're being asked to consider what exactly does it mean for a present sense impression to relate a current event. So under Rule 8031, the present sense impression, a statement describing or explaining an event or condition made while or immediately after perceiving it can be admitted regardless of whether the declarant is available or not. And even though it's otherwise hearsay, if the person describes to someone else or just says into the ether, I see Billy over there, then that is a statement describing a current set of events, and we will admit it. And the theory is that in that short period of time, you don't have an opportunity to concoct a story, and in that immediate response, that almost automatic, quasi-involuntary response, that you are going to be somewhat accurate, or at least accurate enough. Now, it may well be true that you can't come up with a lie in a brief period of time, although that's even questionable. But it's certainly not the case that in such a brief period of time, your perception is going to be correct, that you're going to have an accurate view of the circumstances merely because you're saying it as you see it. Now, my colleague Stephen Baker McKee's recent article in the Seattle University Law Review pretty conclusively proves this. He looks at Twitter messages that were sent shortly after, or actually contemporaneously with the Boston bombing. And because of people's vantage point, they necessarily had false information. If we were to admit those statements for the truth of the matter asserted, we would be allowing in very obvious examples of false information. But it probably is true that in a short period of time, you haven't come up with an opportunity to, or you haven't had the opportunity to use this chance you have to concoct some false tale. But nevertheless, the courts will continue to say that both of those are actually satisfied with the concern about inaccuracy as well as the concern about sincerity are both satisfied when you have a very, very contemporaneous description of something that's being seen under the 8031 exception. State versus Phillips really then asks us what it means to be a contemporaneous statement. So in this case, the victim is killed by her husband, and in order to show motive, the prosecution wants to offer that the husband, who's now on trial for her murder, was having an affair. So they want to offer the statement or the statements of the wife's friends, who will testify that she told them, "My husband is having an affair and I am going to divorce him." Now, in some sense, that is a contemporaneous statement if the affair is ongoing. He is in a state of having an affair, much like one could say that, like I could say, I am married. I'm in a state of being married. That's an ongoing status, and it's happening now. It happened 5 minutes ago, and it'll happen 10 minutes from now as well, or it will be true 5 minutes ago and 10 minutes from now. But that's not what the rule contemplates, because even if we regard Phillips's affair as a status matter, that at the point she says that it is currently true, she doesn't base that information on something she's currently observing. And it's certainly not the case that something like accusing someone else of an affair is something that hours, weeks, months later, one wouldn't have a motive to concoct. When one is describing a status that continues like this, that's not what the rules were meant for. That if you perceive something and report it, then at least the fear of lying has now been stripped out of your reporting of that account. Whereas here she says, my husband is having an affair. It may be an ongoing thing that she's describing as it's ongoing, but it's ongoing for months. And the information that she uses to conclude this, she's not contemporaneously observing as she reports this to her friends. So in this case, Justice Cleckley of the West Virginia Supreme Court, really a remarkable justice whose evidence opinions are quite extraordinary. He wrote a book on West Virginia evidence law that really is a remarkable book, and he cites to it in this opinion. And he observes that there are 3 requirements for an exception to hearsay under 803.1. It must happen at the time. The statement must happen at the time of the event. It must describe. The statement must describe the event, and the event must be something in the declarant's personal knowledge. Now he breaks that out into a 3-part test. He's doing nothing more than describing what's in the rules. Now he does, however, add another component to this. He observes that some courts have required corroboration of present sense impressions in order to admit them, and Justice Cleckley says that that's not going to be a requirement under West Virginia law, but merely that would enhance the likelihood of admission. Corroboration could enhance the trustworthiness of such a statement, either for the jury or if we're looking at this under a 403 balancing test, that corroboration would add something to the scales for admissibility. But of course, as I say that, what that means is that you'll have to check your own jurisdiction wherever you're currently practicing to determine whether or how that particular jurisdiction interprets the corroboration requirement, because that could vary from place to place because that's not formally a part of the rule. So the upshot of the State versus Phillips case, that the thing that you're describing has to be what you are immediately perceiving, not conclusions you're drawing at the present time about an ongoing event that you're not presently observing.